A strange new world. The dimensional rift closed behind Alina with a sound like thunder cracking across a still summer sky. One moment she had been in her university physics lab running what should have been a routine quantum field experiment, and the next she was sprawled on a gleaming floor that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Her equipment was gone, replaced by the stunned faces of creatures that were definitely not human. "Breach in Laboratory Nexus 7. Announced a melodic voice from nowhere. "Unknown entity detected." Alina slowly pushed herself to her feet, her lab coat smudged with residue from whatever had just happened. The beings surrounding her had stepped back, some reaching for devices on their belts, others forming a protective circle around what looked like younger aliens. They were humanoid, but with subtle differences that marked them as something else entirely. Iridescent skin in shades of blue and purple, large eyes with pupils that shifted like kaleidoscopes, and slender frames that seemed almost weightless. "I'm sorry," Alina said, raising her hands to show they were empty. "There was an accident with my experiment. I don't know how I got here." One of the taller beings stepped forward, its skin darkening to a deep indigo. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that seemed impossible for a single throat. "A human. Here, at Acaleodemia." The being's kaleidoscope eyes narrowed. "Impossible. The dimensional barriers are impenetrable to primitive technologies." Primitive. Alina's scientific curiosity momentarily overrode her fear. "I was working with quantum entanglement and dimensional resonance theory. That's hardly primitive." A ripple of what sounded like laughter moved through the gathered aliens, though their faces didn't change expression in ways Alina could recognize. "Quantum entanglement," said another being, this one smaller with a shimmer of gold across its skin. "Humans still treat that as advanced physics. Our hatchlings learn that in their first cycle." Alina felt her cheeks burn. She had been top of her class, working on doctoral research that her professors had called groundbreaking. Now she was being treated like a kindergartner who had wandered into a graduate seminar. The first being who had spoken raised a six-fingered hand, silencing the others. "I am Provost Zellner of Acaleodemia, the Central Galactic Institute for Advanced Studies, and you are an impossibility standing in my laboratory." A panel of light appeared in midair beside Zellner, displaying symbols that rearranged themselves constantly. "Security protocols indicate you should be contained and studied." However, the provost hesitated, head tilting slightly. "Your arrival suggests either extraordinary luck or extraordinary capability." "Both, probably," Alina said, straightening her shoulders. "I've been told I'm stubborn, too. My name is Alina Chin, PhD candidate in quantum physics at MIT. "MIT?" questioned a being that seemed younger than the others. "Is that a significant institution on Earth?" More ripples of that strange laughter. Alina clenched her jaw. "Perhaps the human could demonstrate her knowledge," suggested a being near the back, its tone carrying what Alina thought might be curiosity. It would be interesting to observe primitive thought processes firsthand. Zellner seemed to consider this. "Very well. The human may remain as a temporary research subject and observer. Assign her to basic studies with the first cycles." "Basic studies?" Alina protested. "Look, I don't know how I got here or how to get back, but I'm not a child." "By our standards," Zellner said, "you most certainly are. Your species has barely moved beyond burning hydrocarbons for energy. You have not yet mastered gravity manipulation or achieved consciousness transfer. You cannot even perceive the full spectrum of dimensional reality." Alina wanted to argue, but she was distracted by her surroundings as the initial shock wore off. The laboratory they stood in was unlike anything she had ever seen. What she had taken for walls were actually fields of energy, shimmering with patterns that seemed almost alive. Devices hovered in the air with no visible means of support, and through a vast window, she could see what looked like multiple suns in impossible colors. "Where am I, exactly?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "Acaleodemia exists in the dimensional fold between galaxies," explained the gold-shimmered being, whom Alina later learned was named Ixora, an instructor of dimensional physics. It was established 10,000 of your years ago as a neutral zone for knowledge exchange between advanced civilizations. And humans aren't considered advanced enough to be invited, Alina guessed. Your species was cataloged as potentially promising but currently destructive, Ixora confirmed. The Galactic Council estimated you might be ready for contact in another 500 years, assuming you don't destroy yourselves first. Over the following days, Alina was assigned quarters that adjusted themselves to her biological needs and given access to what the Academia called basic dimensional understanding, a subject that made her head spin despite her background in theoretical physics. She was provided with a translator device that fit behind her ear, allowing her to understand the dozen or so languages spoken at the academy. The other students, or knowledge seekers, as they called themselves, kept their distance. Some watched her with obvious curiosity, others with what seemed like disdain. None approached her directly until her third day, when she found herself struggling with a seemingly simple exercise in the common study area. The task involved manipulating a small cube of energy to form specific patterns that apparently demonstrated basic principles of dimensional folding. To Alina, it was like trying to fold an origami crane while blindfolded and wearing mittens. "You're thinking about it incorrectly," said a voice beside her. Alina looked up to see one of the younger aliens watching her. This one had pale green skin with patterns that reminded her of constellation maps. "I'm Trix," the alien said. "Third cycle in biological adaptations. You're the human." "Alina," she corrected. And yes, apparently I'm thinking about everything incorrectly here. Trix sat beside her, moving with a grace that made Alina feel clumsy by comparison. "You're trying to move the energy directly. That's not how it works. You need to influence the space around it, and the energy will follow the path of least resistance." "That makes no sense," Alina said, frustrated. "Energy doesn't just follow spatial commands without a medium or force to direct it." "Human physics," Trix said, the patterns on their skin shifting slightly in what Alina was beginning to recognize as amusement. "So bound by your three-dimensional perspective." Alina bit back a retort. "Can you show me then?" Trix raised a hand, fingers splayed in a gesture Alina couldn't interpret. The cube of energy before them shimmered and transformed into a complex geometric shape that seemed to fold in on itself in impossible ways. "Now you try," Trix said. "But don't think about moving the energy. Think about suggesting to space that it might be more interesting if it curved just so." Alina almost laughed at the instruction but decided to try. She raised her hand, mimicking Trix's gesture, and tried to imagine not the energy moving, but the space around it bending like fabric. To her shock, the cube rippled and shifted, not forming the perfect shape that Trix had created, but definitely changing in response to her thoughts. "I did it," she exclaimed. "A primitive approximation," came a dismissive voice. Another student had approached, this one with deep blue skin and an elaborate series of ridges where a human would have hair. "But I suppose it's impressive for a species that still thinks light speed is a significant barrier." Trix's patterns darkened. "Not everyone advances at the same rate, Vex. Some civilizations prioritize differently." "Clearly," Vex said, looking Alina up and down. "I heard humans still fight wars over resources and territory. Is that true, Earth creature?" Alina felt a surge of defensiveness. "Some do. Others are working to create sustainable systems and peaceful solutions." "How charmingly contradictory," Vex said. "Your people simultaneously develop weapons of mass destruction and peace treaties. No wonder the Council classified you as currently destructive." Before Alina could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the academy, a harmonious series of tones that nonetheless conveyed urgency. "Stellar flare warning," Trix explained, standing quickly. "The nearest sun is entering an unstable phase. We need to reach a shielded area." Students began moving with purpose toward designated safety zones. Alina followed Trix, trying not to panic as announcements in multiple languages echoed through the halls. When they reached the protection chamber, Alina was startled to see the concern on the faces of the instructors. Even Provost Zellner looked troubled as they consulted rapidly changing displays of energy patterns. "What's happening?" Alina asked Trix. "The stellar flare has triggered a chain reaction in the dimensional stabilizers," Trix explained. "The Academy exists partly in folded space. If the stabilizers fail, everything unfolds catastrophically," finished Zellner, who had overheard. "We would be scattered across multiple dimensions with no way to reconvene." "Can't you fix the stabilizers?" Alina asked. "The control systems are in the section most exposed to the flare," explained Ixura, joining them. "The radiation would be fatal even to our biology." Alina thought quickly. What about robots or drones? "The radiation would disrupt their guidance systems," Zellner said. "And the dimensional fluctuations are already making remote operation impossible." Alina studied the displays showing the Academy structure. Something about the layout triggered a memory from her research. "These stabilizers," she said slowly, "they're basically creating a contained field that allows the Academy to exist partially outside normal space-time." "Right." Zellner looked at her with surprise. "A crude but essentially correct assessment. And the problem is that the flare is introducing energy that's disrupting the field's coherence." "Yes," Ixura confirmed. "The harmonic resonance is destabilizing." Alina's mind raced. "It's like a standing wave problem. When I was working on my experiment, we encountered something similar with quantum field containment." "That's an entirely different scale and complexity," Vex said dismissively. "But the principle is the same," Alina insisted. "If you can't stop the external energy, you need to adapt your system to accommodate and redirect it." She pointed to a section of the display. "If you reverse the polarity of these secondary stabilizers, you could create a dampening field that would absorb the excess energy rather than fighting against it." The instructors exchanged looks. "That is not how we typically approach dimensional stabilization," Zellner said hesitantly. "Because you're so advanced that you always have the perfect solution," Alina said, her frustration breaking through. "But sometimes you need a different perspective, a primitive one that's used to working with limitations." After a moment of silent consultation among the instructors, Zellner nodded. "We have few options. Implement the human suggestion." The next minutes were tense as commands were issued and adjustments made. Alina held her breath, hoping her understanding of the principles involved translated to this far more advanced technology. The displays flickered, showing energy patterns shifting, and then stabilizing in a new configuration. The alarming tones faded, replaced by a different series that seemed to indicate a return to safety. "It's working," Ixura said, surprise evident in their voice. "The stabilizers are absorbing and redistributing the flare energy through the secondary systems. The Academy will require significant recalibration," Zellner noted, "but we are no longer in danger of dimensional collapse." All eyes turned to Alina, who shifted uncomfortably under the attention. "How did you conceive of this solution?" Zellner asked. "It contradicts standard approaches to dimensional stabilization taught across the galaxy." Alina shrugged slightly. "Humans are good at improvising. When you don't have the ideal tools or knowledge, you learn to work with what you have. Sometimes that means looking at problems from unexpected angles." "Fascinating," Zellner said, the indigo of their skin lightening slightly. "Perhaps there is more to learn from humans than the Council anticipated." As the Academy returned to normal operations, Alina found the attitudes toward her subtly shifting. Students who had avoided her now watched with curious interest. Instructors who had dismissed her questions now pondered them thoughtfully, and Alina herself began to see her unexpected displacement, not as a catastrophe, but as an opportunity to learn, to share, and perhaps to change perceptions of humanity across the galaxies. Redefining potential. 3 months after her accidental arrival at Acaleodynia, Alina Chen was no longer a curiosity. She was becoming a phenomenon. Word had spread throughout the academic community about the human who had saved the Academy from dimensional collapse, using what the more conservative scholars called dangerously unorthodox methods, and what others termed brilliantly adaptive thinking. Students from all cycles sought her out, wanting to understand how she approached problems so differently from their traditional education. "I don't understand why you're all so interested in my methods," Alina told a group that had gathered in her study area one evening. "By your standards, I know practically nothing." "That's precisely what makes your perspectives valuable," said Trix, who had become something of a friend. "You approach problems without our preconceptions." "Ignorance as an advantage," said Vex, who had shifted from open disdain to begrudging respect. "It's counterintuitive." "It's not ignorance," Alina corrected. "It's just different knowledge. Humans have had to solve complex problems with limited resources and understanding for our entire history. We get creative out of necessity." Alina had been granted access to more advanced studies, though she still struggled with concepts that her alien classmates considered basic. In exchange, she had begun informal sessions sharing human approaches to problem-solving, which had attracted attention from even senior researchers. Provost Zellner had taken a particular interest in her progress, occasionally observing these sessions from a distance. Today, the provost approached as the group dispersed. "Alina Chen," Zellner said formally, "your presence has created quite the disruption in our curriculum." Alina wasn't sure if this was a reprimand. "I'm sorry if I've caused problems." On the contrary, Zellner's skin shifted to a lighter shade that Alina had learned indicated pleased surprise. "You have prompted valuable discussions about our teaching methodologies. Some instructors are questioning whether our emphasis on perfection and established knowledge might limit innovative thinking." Before Alina could respond, a series of alarms sounded throughout the academy, different from the stellar flare warning, more urgent and complex. "What's happening?" she asked, feeling a familiar spike of adrenaline. Zellner's skin darkened dramatically. "Dimensional anchor failure. Report to emergency stations immediately." The academy erupted into controlled chaos as students and faculty moved swiftly toward designated areas. Unlike the previous emergency, there was no confusion about protocols, but there was a palpable sense of fear that Alina hadn't witnessed before. When they reached the central response chamber, Alina saw senior faculty gathered around a complex three-dimensional display showing the academy and surrounding space. The image was fluctuating wildly, parts of it seeming to blur or stretch in impossible ways. "What's a dimensional anchor?" Alina asked Trix, who had joined the same response group. "A Kaleidemia exists in a dimensional fold," Trix explained quickly. "The anchors are what keep us connected to normal spacetime at specific coordinates. If they fail completely, the Academy could drift into the void between dimensions." Ixor approached, their golden shimmer now dull with concern. "The primary anchor has failed completely. The secondary and tertiary anchors are destabilizing rapidly." "Cause?" Zellner demanded. "Unknown," responded another senior faculty member. "Possibly a natural dimensional tide we haven't observed before, or deliberate interference," Zellner finished grimly. "Deliberate?" Alina asked. "You mean sabotage." "Knowledge is power," Zellner said simply. "Not all civilizations approve of its free exchange at Kaleidemia." The implication stunned Alina. Even at this advanced level of development, politics and power struggles still existed. "Can you rebuild the anchors?" she asked. "We can, but it requires precise calibration to known dimensional coordinates," Ixora explained. "Without a stable reference point, we would have no way to ensure we anchored to the correct dimensional space." Alina studied the display, trying to make sense of the complex patterns. "What about using the stars for navigation? Fixed points in space to triangulate your position." "Stars change position over time," Vex pointed out. "And from different dimensional perspectives, their positions can vary significantly." Alina frowned, thinking, there must be something constant across dimensions that could serve as a reference point. The faculty exchanged glances, The universal constants vary between dimensional planes, one explained. That's basic multi-dimensional theory. Alina paced, frustrated by the limitations of her understanding yet convinced there must be a solution. She thought about her own research back on Earth, about the properties that remained unchanged even during quantum fluctuations. What about vacuum energy? She suggested suddenly. The background energy state of space itself. Too uniform to serve as a navigational marker, HFY replied. Not if you could detect the subtle variations in quantum foam structure, Alina countered. In my research, we found that quantum vacuum fluctuations create unique patterns at the subatomic level, like fingerprints of spacetime itself. This caught the attention of several faculty members. Quantum foam mapping has never been applied to dimensional anchoring, one said thoughtfully. Because it would be inefficient compared to conventional methods, another argued. The precision required would be. It would work, interrupted a new voice. All heads turned to see an elderly alien with translucent skin that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. I am Archente, dimensional theorist emeritus, and the human suggestion has merit. The room fell silent. Even Zellner seemed to defer to this new presence. The quantum structure of vacuum energy does indeed form unique patterns, Tay continued. While difficult to map comprehensively, they could serve as reference points for dimensional anchoring. But we have no instruments calibrated for such measurements, HFY pointed out. We have something better, Tay said, turning to Alina. We have a mind untrained in our preconceptions and familiar with the relevant theoretical framework. Alina felt a chill run down her spine as all eyes turned to her. I don't understand. What can I do? Your experimental work on Earth, Tay said. It involved quantum field manipulation, did it not? The very experiment that accidentally brought you here. Yes, but you have direct experience with the dimensional boundary conditions that none of us possess, Tay explained. You cross dimensions without technological assistance, guided only by your experimental parameters and intuition. Zellner nodded slowly. Archente suggests that you might be able to help recalibrate our anchors based on your unique perspective. The idea terrified Alina. I barely understand your basic dimensional physics. How could I possibly help with something this critical? Sometimes the most valuable insights come from those who see with fresh eyes, Tay said. Will you try? Looking at the faces around her, alien yet now familiar, concerned yet hopeful, Alina realized how much Acaliadinia had come to mean to her. This place of incredible knowledge and discovery, where different species came together in pursuit of understanding, was worth fighting for. I'll try, she said, straightening her shoulders. But I'll need help understanding the anchoring systems. What followed was an intense crash course in dimensional engineering with Tay and the senior faculty explaining concepts faster than Alina could fully grasp them. But she noticed something interesting. When she asked questions that seemed obvious to her, the explanations often faltered, revealing assumptions in their knowledge that had never been challenged. You're saying the anchors need to lock onto specific dimensional coordinates, Alina said, but you're treating dimensions as if they're fixed and separate. What if they're more fluid? What if the boundaries between them are more like membranes that can flex and overlap? That contradicts established dimensional theory, one faculty member objected. Does it? Tay asked quietly. Or does it simply challenge our interpretation of the observations? As the discussions continued, a plan began to form, not based entirely on the advanced knowledge of Acaliadinia, nor solely on Alina's more limited understanding, but on a synthesis of both. They would recalibrate the anchors not to fixed coordinates, but to patterns in the quantum foam that remained consistent across dimensional boundaries. It's like finding your way home not by knowing the exact address, Alina explained, but by recognizing the unique pattern of cracks in the sidewalk outside your house. The implementation was far from simple. It required reconfiguring systems that hadn't been fundamentally changed in thousands of years. But as the Academy continued to drift, experiencing increasingly violent dimensional fluctuations, they had no choice but to try. Alina found herself at the center of a team of the most brilliant minds from a dozen different species, all working together to incorporate her primitive insights into their advanced technology. They worked tirelessly as sections of the Academy began to phase in and out of normal spacetime, sending ripples of distortion through corridors and classrooms. "The tertiary anchor is failing," reported a technician as they prepared for the recalibration attempt. "We have minutes at most before complete dimensional drift." Zelnar looked to Alina. "Are you ready?" Alina took a deep breath, looking at the modified controls before her. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Then proceed." Alina focused on the displays showing quantum fluctuation patterns, looking for the specific signatures she had identified as consistent across dimensional boundaries. With guidance from Tay and the technical team, she began the delicate process of locking the new anchoring system onto these patterns. The Academy shuddered violently. Warnings blared as sections began to disconnect from the main structure. "It's not working," someone called out. "The pattern recognition algorithms aren't stabilizing." Alina stared at the failing systems, a realization dawning. "The algorithms are too precise," she said suddenly. "They're looking for exact matches, but quantum patterns are inherently probabilistic. We need to look for statistical similarities, not perfect matches." "Reconfigure for statistical pattern matching," Tay ordered, and the technical team rushed to implement the change. As the new approach came online, the violent shuddering began to subside. The displays showed the Academy slowly stabilizing, the dimensional drift halting, and then reversing as the new anchors took hold. "It's working," Ixura confirmed, the golden shimmer returning to their skin. "We're re-establishing position in normal spacetime." A cheer went up from everyone present. Alina sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. She had helped save Acaleodynia, not despite her human limitations, but because of her human perspective. In the days that followed, the Academy began repairs and recalibration. The new anchoring system, dubbed the Chen-Tay method, became the subject of intense study and refinement. 1 week after the crisis, Provost Zelnar called Alina to a formal meeting of the Academy Council, the governing body of senior representatives from each major galactic civilization. "Alina Chen of Earth," Zelnar announced formally. "The Council has reviewed the events of recent months and your contributions to Acaleodynia." Alina stood nervously before the assembled representatives, feeling very small and very human. "Your presence here was accidental," Zelnar continued, "a result of what we might have dismissed as primitive experimentation. Yet twice now, your unique perspective has preserved this institution when our advanced knowledge proved insufficient." An elder representative with crystalline features that caught the light in hypnotic patterns spoke next. "We have traditionally evaluated species by their technological advancement, their mastery of physical laws, their transcendence of biological limitations. By these measures, humanity would not qualify for inclusion in our exchange of knowledge." Alina held her head high, prepared to defend her species if necessary. "However, the crystalline being continued, you have demonstrated that our measures may be incomplete. Innovation, adaptability, and the ability to question established knowledge are equally valuable traits that our evaluation systems have undervalued." Archon Tay stepped forward. "The Council proposes the establishment of a Human Insight Initiative, a formal program to bring selected human scholars to Acaleodynia, both to learn and to share their unique perspectives." Alina gasped. "You want to invite more humans here. But what about the Galactic Council's classification of Earth?" "We are petitioning for a review of that classification," Zelnar said. "While humanity may still have much to learn, you have proven that you also have much to teach." And added Tay with what Alina had learned to recognize as the alien equivalent of a smile. "We would like you to be the program's first official representative, not as an accidental visitor, but as a recognized scholar of Acaleodynia." Tears welled in Alina's eyes. "I would be honored," she said, "but I've been missing from Earth for months now. My family, my colleagues, they must think I'm dead." "That can be rectified," Zelnar assured her. With your new understanding of dimensional transit, we believe you can return to Earth at precisely the moment you left, with no time having passed from their perspective. And I could come back here? Alina asked hopefully. Whenever you wish, Tay confirmed. The doorway, once opened, remains accessible to those who know how to find it. As Alina looked around at the beings who had shifted from seeing her as a primitive curiosity to a valued colleague, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. She would be humanity's first official ambassador to the greater galactic community, a bridge between worlds separated not just by space, but by vastly different paths of development. I accept, she said firmly. On behalf of humanity, I accept. And so began a new chapter for both Alina Chen and for humanity, one that would eventually lead to Earth's full integration into the galactic community, centuries ahead of the Council's original timeline. Not because humans had suddenly advanced their technology to match the other civilizations, but because one accidental visitor had demonstrated that different forms of advancement could be equally valuable. The story of Alina Chen became legend at Academia, the human who fell through dimensions and changed the Academy forever, proving that sometimes the greatest insights come from the most unexpected sources.